Welcome back. Next month, the Senate will lose one of its most familiar faces. Republican Lamar is retiring after serving 3 terms in the Senate. He's also been the Secretary of Education and a 2-term governor of Tennessee. In addition, he twice ran for the Republican presidential nomination, coming pretty close in 1996. Unlike many of his colleagues, Alexander is not repeating President Trump's false claims that the 2020 election was rigged against him. So I caught up with him this week and asked about Mr. Trump's post-election behavior. Let me start with a simple question. Any doubt who won the presidential election?
Well, shouldn't be after Monday. I mean, the states have counted, certified their votes. The courts have resolved the disputes. It looks very much like the electors will vote for Joe Biden, and when they do, I hope that he puts the country first, the president, that he takes pride in his considerable accomplishments, that he congratulates the president-elect and he helps him get off to a good start, especially in the middle of this pandemic. We need to not lose one day in the transition in getting the vaccine out to everybody who needs it.
You know, it's been 37 days since the election, 33 days since it was called, 6 days since we know that enough pledged electors have been certified for the election. And yet on Wednesday, the President of the United States tweeted #overturn. Is it about time for this to stop?
Well, Monday it should stop. Remember, it's not unprecedented to contest an election. Al Gore took 37 days, I believe, to contest before he finally conceded, and then he made the best speech of his life respecting the result, which is what I hope the president will do if the electors vote for Joe Biden on Monday, which it is apparent they will.
I don't understand the context, though, of trying to compare to this Al Gore. That was an incredibly close election. The only reason there's a perception that this was closer than some others is the order with which we counted the vote. So is the comparison to 2000 really fair, or is it creating a false straw man?
Well, it's not, you're exactly right. It's not the same circumstance, but what is a good comparison is that Al Gore conceded, then unconceded, then after 37 days he conceded again, but the important thing was he made the best speech of his life. He went on television, he said, the courts have decided, I respect the result, let's put the country first. That's what I hope the president will do if, as expected, on Monday the electors vote for Joe Biden. Everything up before Monday is really a projection. We've gotten used to the media deciding shortly, on election night. My first race for governor, I conceded within 2 hours, but the votes hadn't all been counted. I think it's fair to allow candidates to contest elections if they want to, if they have evidence. But when it's over, it needs to be over.
All right. I don't remember these same comments 4 years ago on Hillary Clinton should get more time and all of this stuff. Do you see why it looks like a double standard?
Well, what about Stacey Abrams' concession speech? Have you found it yet?
I understand. Look, I understand that, but I guess
that was 2 years ago, Chuck. She was defeated by more votes. She was defeated by more votes for governor. And why don't you say something about that? You're going to keep talking about Trump.
Look, I'm not here to talk about Stacey Abrams. I'm not covering that race, and that's her decision. And I think that is something that she deserves to be asked. But the question I have is, this is how the Republican Party seems to define itself in the Trump era, which is anything the president does that is unseemly, breaks a norm, instead of criticizing it, you just say, well, what about? It's whataboutism. What about this? That doesn't dismiss the president's behavior, does it?
Mm-hmm. But I would think if you're going to talk about Donald Trump all the time, you might mention Stacey Abrams once. After all, Georgia is where the Senate races are.
It is something I've mentioned a handful of times.
It has been.
I'm not here to debate
you mentioned that. Well, why aren't you? Why aren't you? Well, I have consistently said that if the president loses, and it appears that he will, when the electors vote, he should put the country first, take pride in his accomplishments, congratulate Joe Biden, and help him off to a good start, especially because of the vaccine. I think that's a very proper way to think about that. and it respects the processes we have. In fact, that should help increase the validity of the election if all of those who think that it's not valid see that states have counted, recounted their votes, that the courts have resolved the disputes, that the electors have all voted. It's very hard to say that Joe Biden's not validly elected after Monday if all that happens.
Here's the thing. Are you aware of all of these threats against election officials? Sort of some of them are you've probably seen the comments by the gentleman from Georgia, a Republican official who said these threats, threats of physical harm have to stop. The Secretary of State in Michigan had people outside her house. Do you not hold the president responsible for creating creating the conditions that's encouraging this behavior?
Chuck, I've said what I have to say about this. I think to threaten election officials is a deplorable thing to do. I think the most important thing for our country, as George Washington said when it was founded, is not the first election, but the second election, the orderly transfer of power. I think anything that detracts from that is not good for our democracy, and people can make their own judgment about whether the president's acting appropriately or not. I think he has a right to take his legal cases. I don't think his lawyers have a right to go to court with specious lawsuits with no evidence, and I think the processes say it's over on Monday if the electors vote for Joe Biden, which I expect that they will.
You'll laugh at this, but I found this op-ed you wrote in December of 1996 after Bob Dole's loss. And here was the lead of your op-ed, Senator. Our national agenda sounds like a demolition derby. Abolish the Department of Education, blow up the IRS, slash environmental regulations, rip up the Federal Register, send welfare back to the states. This is what voters hear from us. You were lamenting that in 1996. One could argue those were the good old days of bipartisanship. I guess you were prescient, but I think you were wrong. Voters want to hear the demolition derby. Is that what we're finding out?
Well, it makes a lot more news. I mean, Washington's a split-screen television. On the one side, you see the confirmation hearings and the tweets. On the other side, if people would look, they'd see, Democrats and Republicans working together to create a vaccine, to pass the most important outdoor recreation and environmental law in 50 years, to permanently fund black colleges, to move medical miracles into doctors' offices more quickly, to fix No Child Left Behind. That affects 50 million children. All that happened. It doesn't make the same kind of news the fights do over on the other screen, but it's happening. Right. And more of it should be happening given the talent that exists in the United States Senate and the need in our country for an institution that's forced to come to broad agreements on tough issues that most of us can vote for and that the country will accept.
Last question. Trump 2024, would you bet against him?
I would never bet against him. I think he'll be a force in our party and in our country for as long as he wants to be. He's, number one, been president of the United States. He's gotten a lot of votes from a lot of people, and he's mastered the communications network, the internet democracy, that influences our internet democracy in a way no one else has. So if he wants to be a factor, he will be.
You don't sound enthusiastic about that.
Well, I answered your question. I think he's entitled to do that if he wants to be. I mean, he's president. He has lots to say. And if he wants to be a factor, he can be.